Showdown in federal court ends with the leader of a Hawaiian group being taken away to jail for defying a federal judge.
Ayau, the man seen here, in contempt of court for not revealing the location of 83 Native Hawaiian artifacts. Hui Malama borrowed the artifacts from Bishop Museum back in 2000 and say they have since repatriated the artifacts. Now, opposing Native Hawaiian groups are suing to get them back.
Dozens of supporters insisted the issue never should have made it into a federal courtroom. Linda Coble has that part of our story.
For us, it's like arguing in a federal court over the objects in the Sistine Chapel.
The crowd gathered to support what they called the sacred work of Hui Malama. The organization borrowed 83 priceless cultural objects from Bishop Museum in 2000 and buried them in 2 Big Island locations they've refused to identify.
These are not cultural artifacts. They're funerary objects that were made with the hands of our kupuna. They have the mana of our kupuna, and it belongs to no one.
Hui Malama has repatriated more than 2,000 of their ancestors' bones over the past 16 years. And as far as they're concerned, the repatriation of this set of Kauai cave artifacts is pau. But Hui Malama's critics and complainants in the case insist that's not their call.
Who told them to make that determination in the first place? Shouldn't it have been shared with all the people that had a direct interest, that had identified themselves and had come forward?
We believe this is not a cultural issue, that it's a legal rights issue, that our rights have been violated by them.
It's not an issue of politics, it's not an issue of ownership, that this is an issue of religion.
The traditional practitioners supporting Hui Malama prayed the judge would respect their practices and not hold religion in contempt, and that their children would learn to respect the graves of their ancestors and everything buried with them.
Not what's in a museum, not what they can physically touch and play with. That is the lesson that we're going to learn today. Grave robbing is wrong.
All of you, when you're planning to die, please be sure you don't put any of your personal jewelry or your feather lace or anything that's precious to you, because some museum in the future can dig you up and have a look and say, oh, we want to take that because that's an important artifact.
This issue may be resolved in court, but the debate will go on.
And Edward Ayau will stay behind bars until the location of more than 80 Hawaiian cultural artifacts is revealed. KCHNL News 8's Marvin Buenkensehu begins our team coverage with today's federal court ruling.
These supporters of Hui Malama Iwi Kupuna o Hawai'i nei, or group caring for the ancestors of Hawaii, chanted and prayed for an outcome they knew would be a long shot. And they were right. Within an hour's time, U.S. District Judge David Ezra held the organization's executive director, Edward Halealoha Ayau, the man seen here, in contempt of court for not revealing the location of 83 Native Hawaiian artifacts. Hui Malama borrowed the objects from Bishop Museum back in 2000 and say they have since had them repatriated. Opposing Native Hawaiian groups are suing to get them back. Ezra explained Ayau would remain behind bars until he reveals the mysterious location, someone else reveals the location, or the artifacts are simply returned. During his ruling, Ezra told the packed courtroom, quote, Hui Malama has taken upon itself that their way is the right way and the only way. That will not be tolerated. He also said sternly, make no mistake, the court's order will be complied with. Emotions had already been charged up before the proceedings, and once Judge Ezra issued his ruling, the crowded courtroom became indignant. Ezra dismissed one man from the room who yelled in disgust. The judge then ordered 35-year-old Emerson Nahale'a into custody for 5 days for his outburst. As for the missing artifacts, Ayau told Ezra he would absolutely not reveal the object's location, keeping their secret for now.
Now, Judge Ezra called this a sad day for him as he reminded the courtroom that this is a case of Native Hawaiians suing Native Hawaiians. Meanwhile, as Marvin told us outside the courthouse, emotions from members of Hui Malama spilled over following the decision by Judge Ezra. Tonight's team coverage continues from the newsroom now, and KCHNL News 8's Darren Pai, who was outside the federal courthouse. Darren?
Well, Howard, attorneys for Hui Malama say they had considered the possibility that Judge Ezra would find some of their members in contempt of court today. Now, despite that ruling, the group says it has no intention of giving the judge what he wants.
I took those kupuna and I put them back where they belong. I did it too. I did it.
All of us.
Defiant Native Hawaiians say they know where 83 Hawaiian cultural artifacts were placed, but they'll never tell.
It's not something we divulge. It's one of the secrets that we have, and that will always be a secret with us.
Members of Hui Malama say the federal courts can hold their executive director, Edward Ayau, in custody indefinitely, and they still won't budge.
It is not possible for a Hui Malama member, with the purposes in which they were organized, to reveal this information. It is absolutely against their conscience.
Supporters say the courts don't understand Hui Malama's cultural practices.
I believe that there are laws against grave robbing. It's an American law, it's a Hawaiian law against grave robbing.
Members of Hui Malama say they now consider Ayau to be a martyr, and they're even more determined to stick to their position. Hui Malama borrowed the artifacts from the Bishop Museum 5 years ago and say they'll never be returned. Judge Ezra did find other supporters of Hui Malama in contempt of court, but they were not jailed.
To reveal the location of 83 buried Hawaiian artifacts, but the leader of a Native Hawaiian group, Hui Malama, refused. Edward Halealoha Ayau was found in contempt of court and taken by marshals to the federal detention center, and he says he'll stay there as long as it takes. KGMB9's Jim Mendoza reports.
While Hawaiian chants and prayers filled the air at the federal courthouse, Edward Halealoha Ayau came dressed in black. It would be a dark day for his Native Hawaiian group, Hui Malama, and their supporters.
Grave robbing is wrong. To grave rob 2 times is even more wrong.
Federal Judge David Ezra ordered Ayau and other Hui Malama leaders to say exactly where in 2 Big Island caves they reburied 83 ancient objects on loan from Bishop Museum, and who buried them. Ezra told Ayau, "You have backed this court into a corner." He gave him one last chance to comply. Ayau said absolutely not. To do so would violate the Kupuna, whose remains are in those caves. Ezra pronounced him in contempt of court and ordered him into federal custody. Ayau fired back, "I'd be honored." Outside, reaction to the order was met with raw emotion.
He took Eddie today. He left open the possibility of taking us at a later date. And I think that's the stick approach.
We cannot divulge that kind of information. And it has to do with our ceremonies, and it has to do with our connections. But he refused to hear that.
The leader of one Hawaiian group suing Hui Malama says if the objects are damaged when they're recovered, it's Hui Malama's fault.
They owe it to the Hawaiian people, they owe it to the world, because it wasn't their place to do this. So if there are any damages, they should be held accountable.
Ezra told Ayau that Hui Malama took it upon itself to determine their way is the right and only way. He said there are others who have different views. Ayau will be held indefinitely until he or someone else says where the objects are, or they are returned to Bishop Museum. Hui Malama members won't give in, even if it would get Ayau released.
We help him by not compromising his beliefs as well as ours.
When the objects would see the light of day was one issue up in the air. When Hui Malama's leader will see freedom again is another.
A day later, the wife of Hui Malama leader Edward Ayau is dealing with the uncertainty of how long he'll be in prison. Today, she spoke with KGMB9's Jim Mendoza in a story you'll see only on 9.
Thank you, Kim. Kainani Kahau-Naile says that her husband is passionate about his work, but that passion put him behind bars. Edward Halealoha Ayau spent his final minutes of freedom in the spotlight and under scrutiny in a courtroom. Today was his first alone in federal prison, away from his wife.
We have to find a little bit of light for that dark day.
Ayau and Kainani Kahau-Naile recently married. The summons to federal court cut short their honeymoon.
I cried at the courthouse a little, but after that was done, that's the only time it was, I got all the tears out.
Before he was led away, Ayau gave Kainani his to-do list and words for Hui Malama.
Halealoha's message was to remain steadfast. Remain steadfast. The work needs to continue.
Ayau's being held indefinitely until it's known where these objects are buried in Big Island caves. Yesterday, Judge David Ezra told him, one way or the other, they'll come back to Bishop Museum. Ayau won't say where they are, and some Hawaiians who oppose Hui Malama say the group's stubbornness led to this.
My perception is that Edward chose this path a long time ago, and it's culminated now in then having to go to jail.
With all contact with her husband cut off, Kainani's applying for visiting privileges at the federal detention center. She's been told approval could take up to 2 weeks. A long time for newlyweds, long for anyone.
We'll support each other, and we'll do our best to communicate. I would say rock on. Yeah, that's Halealoha, rock on.
Now, you may recognize Kainani. She is a Nahoku Hanohano award-winning singer and songwriter, and she says what's happening to her husband, what's happening to them as a couple, is giving her inspiration for her music.
People gathered outside the federal detention center at sunrise and then again early last night to support Ayau. U.S. District Judge David Ezra sent Ayau to federal prison last Tuesday after holding him in contempt of court for not revealing the location of 83 Native Hawaiian artifacts. Supporters say Ayau should not have been imprisoned.
Without any criminal act, be put in prison. And so we're here to reaffirm our spiritual practices, which is what the man who's in that jail stands for.
Opposing Native Hawaiian groups are suing Hui Malama to get the artifacts back. Judge Ezra explained Ayau would remain behind bars until he reveals the mysterious location or the artifacts are simply returned. Ayau supporters say they will continue gathering outside the federal detention center until the Native Hawaiian leader is released.
The standoff is over whether Hawaiian artifacts returned to burial caves should be brought back out and possibly displayed in museums. Hui Malama, the group which returned the items to the caves, has so far refused a federal judge's order to retrieve them or help other Hawaiian groups to collect them. That's why Hui Malama's leader, Edward Ayau, has been in jail since last week. In court today, Eddie Ayau remained defiant, refusing to reveal specifically where the 83 items have been hidden in 2 caves or who participated in the repatriation. But Judge David Ezra expected that and proposed and said that Ayau could get out of jail sooner if Hui Malama participates in a Hawaiian-style mediation process. Ayau's attorney says his client was pleased.
I think he's saying that this is a positive move. He was a bit surprised, pleasantly surprised about what the judge's attitude was about going forward with this what they call the parallel process of attempting to approach some means of Hawaiian resolution to a Hawaiian problem.
Now, the attorney for the Hawaiians who want the items retrieved says she will have to talk to her clients before agreeing to Hawaiian mediation.
Top story.
9 days ago, U.S. District Judge David Ezra sent Ayau to prison for not disclosing the location of 83 artifacts. The court has been stymied, so Judge Ezra is willing to try something new. These are some of the artifacts in question. Hui Malama borrowed them from Bishop Museum in 2000, but instead of returning the artifacts, Hui Malama buried them in 2 caves on the Big Island. Other Hawaiian groups have sued Hui Malama, asking that the artifacts be returned. Hui Malama Executive Director Edward Ayau knows where they are, but has defied a court order to say where. So, on December 27th, Judge David Ezra held Ayau in contempt and sent him to prison for an indeterminate amount of time. This afternoon, Ezra proposed that those involved in the dispute engage in Hawaiian Alternative Dispute Resolution, or ho'oponopono, to work out their differences.
I'm pleased that the judge has realized that there are alternate mediation methods, one of them being Hawaiians getting together and talking.
Hui Malama has already indicated it will participate, but an attorney for the Hawaiian group suing Hui Malama isn't ready to commit.
I haven't had an opportunity to fully discuss the matter with my clients yet.
So you're not sure whether or not you'd be a willing participant?
Right now, I can't answer that question.
Hui Malama's attorney again asked Judge Ezra to release Ayau from prison. That way, Ayau could participate in the alternative dispute resolution process, but Judge Ezra denied the request, saying he's not pussyfooting around. That means Ayau, seen here with supporters the day he was locked up, will stay behind bars.
His resolve remains the same. He's committed, and he's committed to the kupuna to take care of them.
Judge Ezra says this is the first time the Hawaiian concept of ho'oponopono has been proposed in federal court to resolve a legal dispute. He's giving all involved until Monday to accept or reject the idea. If anyone decides against it, it'll be up to U.S. law to resolve the matter.
Dig up our bones! bones! Bishop Museum, my grave robbers!
A loosely knit group of Hawaiian activists converged on the Bishop Museum, calling for the resignation of Museum Director Bill Brown, accusing him of blocking Hawaiian repatriations.
He's a Western trained scientist with a belief that the things in the collection that they have here it belongs to him.
The demonstrator said it's not the cultural artifacts willingly donated to the museum by their owners and then displayed at issue here. It's the sanctity of the graves of their ancestors and their bones.
They're making profit off of our culture and our people. Good morning, sunshine.
Museum goers couldn't help but notice the demonstration and be drawn into the discussion.
I'm glad that we have an opportunity to see them, but if they belong buried and that's their belief, religious beliefs, don't fool around with Mother Nature.
I'd like to support them, but I'd also like to have my child see some of the exhibits. So.
The Family Day attraction was the Sesame Street Body exhibit, an irony of sorts to the demonstrators.
From the Bishop Museum, we've been facing attacks on the Hawaiian body through experiments, through the measuring of our bones, through the different experiments that archaeologists and anthropologists have conducted over the years, and sick of it already.
Scores of mainland museums face similar challenges. Under the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act, they have been returning disputed objects to avoid fines. Bishop Museum director and spokesman were not available for comment today. This museum goer offered a suggestion to the Hawaiian organizations torn apart by the debate.
They should battle it out, and then whatever the consensus is, then take it to the Bishop Museum as a unified decision.
Meanwhile, the federal court case involving the Hawaiian Artifacts Bishop Museum loan to Hui Malama is headed to mediation. Hui Malama's leader remains in federal prison until the location of those artifacts is known or the case is resolved.
About 50 protesters stood in the way of museum goers. The protesters say the Bishop Museum is not doing enough to protect Hawaiian ancestors, sacred burial sites, and historical artifacts.
We want specifically Bill Brown to resign. Under his term here as the head of the Bishop Museum, we've seen things escalate and get worse, where at a time it was starting to get better.
Museum officials declined to comment on the protest.
The bones and also all those things that went with them were meant to stay hidden with them. It wasn't something you talked about, nobody asked about it, and so forth. And to go ahead and search out bones was a direct sign of desecration and defilement.
The protesters included students from Hawaiian charter schools, Kupuna, and activists from neighbor islands.
Lonnie Kissel is concerned about a letter written by William Brigham, the Bishop Museum's director 100 years ago.
It implies some wrongdoings.
In it, Brigham, who was also an attorney, responds to David Forbes and his discovery of human remains and objects in a Big Island cave.
He's asking Mr. Forbes to keep the matter quiet, for there are severe laws here concerning burial caves, and I shall not make the matter public, of course, until you say so.
The letter goes on to say, if you should wish to keep the collection or part of it, the koilo, or cave, from this place,
throw any suspicious persons off the scent.
But despite the letter, a transaction happens anyway.
They chose to go ahead and purchase the items that were in what they knew to be burial caves.
A copy of the 1905 receipt reveals the price, $472. Kissel also shares another document that angers her, a report written by Forbes in England in 1909. In it, he shares, beyond what we saw was the mummy remains of many Hawaiians in the sitting position, wrapped up in their tapa cloths.
He also says that there are hundreds of other Hawaiians buried in that cave. He's aware of Hawaiian protocol. He knows that you don't enter and you don't disturb. I did it anyway, and this is my experience with it. In essence, it supports Hui Malama's stand that, these were buried with Kupuna Iwi, are the bones of our ancestors. It would be if we went up to Punch Bowl and started to dig up the soldiers and take all that's important to them and then bury it back.
Kissel says this has gone on too long and believes Hui Malama's executive director, Edward Halealoha Ayau, should not be in jail.
He's in jail because he told the truth. And that's all this article is doing, is verifying everything that they've been saying.
The Bishop Museum historically and currently supports the repatriation process, which in this case gives equal voice to all 14 groups who've been recognized as having rightful claims to the items. The groups are trying to settle the case out of court. Last week, federal judge David Ezra agreed to let the parties solve the dispute through a traditional Hawaiian mediation process. They are using Hawaiian elders instead of lawyers as mediators.
Judge David Ezra released Ayau from the federal detention center so that he can participate in the out-of-court mediation talks. They'll try to settle the dispute between Hui Malama and the Native Hawaiian groups who filed the lawsuit against them. Ayau says he was surprised the judge released him. He says he doesn't regret standing up for what he and his group Hui Malama believe in.
It was an honor to have been put in this position because it allowed not just myself, but our organization to demonstrate our commitment to our people, especially to those who doubt us. I didn't expect to be released, but I can't say I'm exactly ecstatic about it.
Judge David Ezra said Ayau is still in contempt of court for not saying where Hui Malama reburied the artifacts on loan from the Bishop Museum. Ayau will be under home confinement and he must wear an electronic monitoring device. Ayau says he still will not reveal where the cultural artifacts are reburied on the Big Island, but he says he will abide by the judge's wishes and participate in mediation in good faith. The court also picked two mediators, Kamehameha School's trustee and Hokulea navigator Nainoa Thompson, and Earl Kava, who works for Kamehameha School's outreach program. Meanwhile, the president of the Royal Hawaiian Academy of Traditional Arts, one of two groups suing Hui Malama, says many people wanted mediation all along.
I think it's an opportunity, and we look forward to people sitting down and being able to talk. As long as there's a compromise, then you can find a solution.
The court said February 24th as the deadline for a solution. And for now, the mediators must decide when, where, and how the talks will take place.
A bittersweet day for Edward Halealoha Ayau, who is enjoying his first taste of freedom in weeks.
I guess on one hand I should be really happy, but I'm not, because the court made it clear that they're still proceeding to enter the caves.
Today, the leader of Hui Malama looked relaxed and rested.
Ayau now is to be restricted to home confinement on the island of Molokai.
He will be allowed to work, but he must return home at night. Ayau will also be involved now in the Hawaiian mediation with 13 other groups involved in the dispute.
Are you confident a solution can be worked out where everyone will be happy? The courts, the other Hawaiian organizations, your organization?
I don't know if I'm confident, but I'm hopeful that the dilemma has now been put back into a more culturally appropriate process.
And if no progress is made?
My understanding is if he deems our participation not to be meaningful or in good faith, then he has the option of returning me to incarceration.
And Ayau tells me he will not reveal the location of those possessions. Also, because he is under house arrest, he must let officials know where he is at all times and wear a tracking device.